In 6 days, Hungary votes. The latest independent poll gives Peter Magyar Tisza party 56% against 37% for Viktor Orbán's Fidesz. Bloomberg prediction markets price a 70.5% probability that Orbán will be out of office by December 31st. Polymarket, the international press, is already writing the obituary. They have been wrong before. In 2014, Fidesz retained its supermajority with 70% of parliamentary seats, despite winning less than 45% of the vote. The system is not designed to translate popular will into parliamentary seats. It is designed to translate Fidesz votes into structural dominance. And the man who designed it has been running this country for 16 consecutive years. Welcome to Axial documentation. This is the story of how a 25-year-old student activist who demanded freedom from authoritarian rule built the most sophisticated authoritarian system in the European Union, and why, on April 12, 2026, that system may finally face its terminal stress test. To understand Viktor Orbán in 2026, you need to understand Viktor Orbán in 1989, not as a symbol, as a mechanism. June 16, 1989, Budapest. 250,000 Hungarians gathered to rebury Imre Nagy, the leader of the 1956 revolution, executed as a traitor, now honored as a martyr. In the crowd, a 25-year-old law student steps to the microphone. His message is not complicated. Hungary for Hungarians. The Soviets must leave. The speech lasts 6 minutes. By the time he steps off the stage, Viktor Orbán has become the most famous young politician in Hungary. That speech was not primarily about freedom. It was about power, about who gets to define what Hungary is and who belongs to it. Orbán understood something in 1989 that most of his contemporaries missed. Politics is not about values. It is about control of the narrative. And the man who controls the narrative controls the country. 37 years later, the narrative has changed entirely. The enemy is no longer Moscow. It is Brussels. The threat is no longer Soviet tanks. It is Ukrainian influence and liberal globalism. But the mechanism is identical. Hungary for Hungarians. Us against them. Whoever defines the them controls the votes. 2/3, 4 times in a row, with less than half the popular vote. That is not democracy. That is engineering. In 2010, Fidesz swept to power with a supermajority and immediately used it to rewrite the constitution. What followed was not governance. It was institutional capture. Executed with the precision of a systems engineer who knows exactly which levers control which outcomes. The courts first. The requirement for opposition confirmation of judge appointments removed. The number of judges increased. Age and term limits abolished. The result? A constitutional court stacked with Fidesz loyalists that functions as a rubber stamp, not a check. The media next. A new media law allowed Fidesz to appoint the leadership of the national media regulator. Independent outlets lost their licenses, often for minor administrative infractions, and in 2019, nearly 500 media companies merged into a single outlet controlled by Orbán allies, dominating local coverage across the country. Then the electoral map. Gerrymandered constituencies spread Fidesz voters across many small rural districts while packing opposition voters into fewer large urban ones. In 2014, this allowed Fidesz to win 70% of parliamentary seats with less than 45% of the popular vote. And the diaspora vote, 2.5 million ethnic Hungarians living in neighboring countries, voting by mail ballot, 94% of whom voted for Fidesz in 2022. This is what Orbán calls illiberal democracy. Elections remain, but the infrastructure that converts votes into power has been designed to produce one outcome. The system is free. It is not fair. 17 billion euros, frozen, EU cohesion funds Hungary qualified for, but cannot access because its rule of law no longer meets European standards. 9% of GDP, sitting in Brussels while Hungarian hospitals run out of supplies. Fidesz is currently polling at around 39%. Facing its most serious challenge since Orbán returned to power in 2010. The reason is not ideology, it is economics. Hungary's economic model worked as long as EU money flowed. EU cohesion funds accounted for 3.5% of GDP annually between 2004 and 2020. When the rule of law deteriorated to the point where Brussels froze those funds, the model broke. Inflation reached 17.2% in 2023, the highest in the entire European Union. GDP contracted, and the recovery has been anemic. 0.6% growth in 2024, 0.5% in 2025. Meanwhile, Orbán has deepened Hungary's dependence on Russian energy. Russian oil now accounts for 93% of Hungary's imports, up from 61% before the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. The country that once demanded freedom from Moscow is now its most dependent client in the EU. In March this year, Orbán used his veto to block a €90 billion aid package to Ukraine, linking it to a dispute over pipeline damage. And the corruption has become impossible to ignore. According to the Financial Times, since 2010, approximately 40% of Hungarian government tender funds went to companies owned by 13 close associates of Orbán, totaling more than €28 billion. Hungary now ranks as the most corrupt country in the European Union. The voters who once saw Orbán as the defender against a corrupt establishment are discovering that he built a new one. With himself at the center, he fought the Soviets. He became what he fought. Peter Magyar, formerly a member of Fidesz, former husband of Orbán's justice minister, became the leader of the Tisza opposition party in July 2024, after releasing a secret recording of his ex-wife discussing a presidential pardon connected to a sexual abuse cover-up at a children's home. He is not a traditional opposition figure. He is someone who was inside the system, who knows exactly how it functions, and turned against it. Tisza is currently polling at around 48%, consistently ahead of Fidesz for the past year. Magyar has taken his campaign into rural constituencies that opposition politicians have not visited in years. Mass demonstrations on both sides have drawn tens of thousands. Voter mobilization is extraordinarily high, but the polling lead does not automatically translate into seats. Hungary's mixed-member majoritarian system adds unused votes from winning candidates to the winning party's national tally, a surplus votes mechanism that amplifies the largest party's parliamentary representation beyond its popular vote share. Orbán has won every election since 2010 with less than 54% of the popular vote. Magyar may win the popular vote and still not become prime minister. Orbán has three structural allies on April 12th: the electoral law he wrote himself, the endorsement of Donald Trump, and the backing of Vladimir Putin, and 8 consecutive by-election victories for Fidesz since Tisza entered the political arena suggests the gap between urban polling and rural electoral reality remains significant. Can a system vote out the man who designed it? Here is what the April 12th election will actually decide, regardless of who wins. If Magyar wins, Hungary returns to the EU mainstream. The frozen €17 billion begins to flow. The Russia relationship is renegotiated. And every European populist who pointed to Orbán as proof that illiberal democracy is sustainable loses their Exhibit A. If Orbán wins, the system demonstrates that it is self-reinforcing, that a sufficiently engineered electoral infrastructure can survive economic failure, institutional decay, and a 19-point polling deficit. And every aspiring autocrat in Europe will take note. Both framings miss the deeper question. The question is not whether Orbán survives. It is whether the machine survives him. Because the courts are still packed, the media is still consolidated, the electoral map is still gerrymandered, the diaspora votes are still counted. Even if Magyar wins on April 12th, Fidesz retains structural control of the institutions that determine what any government can actually do. Orbán started as a liberal fighting Soviet control. He ended as an illiberal fighting EU control. The enemy changed, the method did not. And the method, not the man, is the lasting contribution of Viktor Orbán to European political history. The stress test is not on April 12th. The stress test is what happens on April 13th, and the day after that, and the year after that, whether the machine outlasts the mechanic. In the EU's most important election of 2026, that is the only variable that matters. Logistics secure the future. Mathematics secure the power. Analysis terminated.